Yeah, so good morning. I'm Meghan Petersen. I'm an enterprise account executive at CBT, and joining me is Kelly Ireland, who is the CEO, founder, and CTO. So before we dive into this, Kelly, can you give us a quick intro into who CBT is?
Absolutely. And thank you, Meghan. And thank you, Katie, and everybody at the IoT Club. So excited to be giving this podcast to all of you. CBT was open 21 years ago. So I had been in tech since the late 70s. And I just saw a different way. I saw a different way and a better way. And I opened a company that would allow us to go down a journey of innovation and doing things that were outside the box. So it was just kind of developing a fertile ground for us to be able to go do what we wanted to do in the fashion that we felt we should do it. And I think as we go through this talk, you'll see between Meghan and I, being in that kind of environment allows for a lot of growth that you wouldn't normally get in other organized corporations and companies, and it really gives you that ability to go beyond what you think is possible.
I, for one, am very glad that you started this journey. So let's
and I'm
get
glad
into
you joined us.
Yeah, that's why we're all here. Kelly, tell us about the Refinery of the Future, how it got started, what it is, and then the technology behind it, and how it is reshaping manufacturing, factories, and plants.
Yeah, and this is all about IoT, and it's kind of the reason you're all here. I was approached just going on 6 years ago about coming into a possible project that was wrapped around oil and gas. It was a vertical group from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and they said, would you be interested? And I was known as one of those CEOs that was willing to invest. So I took a look at it. I talked to them. I talked to some of the partners they were pulling in, which were different ISVs and OEMs, hardware and software manufacturers, and thought, this sounds really interesting. And though it was very early on, it still made complete sense to me. So what we did is put together, actually get a company that offered up Techsmart Chemical out of Galena Park, Texas. What they did was brilliant because their CEO took a whole group of people to HPE labs to see what a smart pump was. So this is a chemical processing plant, and you're taking a bunch of people that have no idea what a smart pump is. Took them down to this demo lab, and showed them what it was. And he said, this is awesome. And everybody was really excited about seeing it, but they're like, where can we see it in production? And the answer was, you can't. Some are protected under NDA, some really haven't implemented it. It's very early on. And so Doug said, well, why don't you use my plant? And so Techsmart Chemical is 7.5 acres. Of multiple chemical processing, toll processing. So it gave us kind of what I call a living demo lab where we could try this stuff out. They ended up doing a structured approach of really same thing we use, design thinking, bringing in the right parties, gathering the information on each separate solution. We mapped out 5 solutions, starting with condition monitoring and predictive maintenance. There was video analytics, or video as a sensor. There was worker safety and security. There was connected worker, and then there was asset intelligence, which also embraced a digital twin approach. And so over 20 plus companies joined in, all mostly hardware and software. And then CBT ended up, as we worked through multiple years of trying to get these launched and testing and iterating and doing everything else, that it was very important to have an SI that understood that you take hardware, you take software, you put it together. It's not like IT. It's very different than IT, where everybody had tested all that together. This is taking parts and pieces that had never been integrated and, censoring different things and gathering that data and really understanding how to get all of that work together. And like Meghan has said before, we have a thing called the Book of Life, of gathering everything we learned at Refinery of the Future. My team calls it the Book of Hell, because it's basically every hurdle you've had to go over, every block wall you've had to break through, everything you've had to do, because this is not simple stuff. Don't think it is. If you approach it that way, you won't be successful. This takes work, and it takes both sides of IT and OT working together, understanding each other, being respectful of each other, and just having a common goal of achieving, what no one thought was possible.
Right. So it's been around for 5-6 years now.
Yeah.
Why is it still relevant?
It's actually even more relevant now. It was slow to be adopted. And we really thought that if you look at it, if you look at when cloud came out, cloud across the world promised the world. It's like cloud is everything. It gives you everything and it costs you less. When it really came down to brass tacks, it actually cost a lot of corporations a lot more. Took control away, wasn't as good, cost more money. Everybody's adopted it, and they've kind of iterated around different ways of approaching cloud. But what we saw, and I probably spoke personally to over 60 corporations that said, no, we're not even dipping our toe in. We're going to wait until somebody else does it, because we saw what happened with cloud. We're not going to get burned. So what we've had is I call toe dipping. We've gotten a few. When COVID came about in 2020, that's when we saw it kind of take a leap because of connected worker. So having a worker that could be out there, as you've seen, Meghan, and I'd love to have you tell some of your stories of how that really played out, of people jumping in and saying, okay, I no longer can stay away from this. This might solve some immediate problems I have with not being around workers, not having managers be able to be there, or supervisors, having lone workers, and how do we make sure we communicate with them correctly?
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned kind of how it started, Kelly, because one of the first questions that customers ask me today is, where have you done this? Can I see it? And having the ability to point to something that isn't a proof of concept or a mini lab is invaluable. And, the use cases truly transcend industries. I mean, it's everywhere. It's in all places, and places that we never imagined, whether it's, trucking or dental or medical or manufacturing, it really seems to translate, and it's intense. But, some of what we saw, I guess, in early COVID, and we still continue to see, is, you're reducing, workforce, as many people as you can on a site. So how do you troubleshoot remotely? And especially if you need the use of, your hands. So, there's situations where we would implement a wearable device of sorts, so that they could actually, see what the person was seeing in real time, be able to communicate and give feedback, or something like a digital workflow, right? So walking someone through these steps, whereas before there was maybe a trainer or a manager who had to, be present to actually assist them, but giving them a lot more autonomy. And I think, it really has been a catalyst for a lot of just this digital transformation in general. And I think it's great.
Well, and you think about it, a lot of our mission has been solving problems that customers have had. And like you mentioned, there was one client that reached out to us because he had 40 workers not showing up in one day because of COVID. And he's like, I bring temps on, but I don't have a workflow. I don't have a way for them to step through what I need them to do. It's not extensive. It's not, critical things that they have to be fully trained on. They need to go through the steps. And so it was a way to deliver that to them. And like you did mention on industries, I counted last night, 23 different industries. This, even though we've tested this all out at Refinery of the Future, and we call it Refinery of the Future, it's really, it's the future for all industries. Because like you mentioned, I was amazed at some of the industries that have approached us saying, we've heard about this, we think there's an application. I know when we tour people, we actually have access to tour people through Texmark and showcase in real life, putting these IoT solutions into production. And I've had, entertainment. I've had MGM International go immediately, like the light went off and they went, we would use this in water management. And I was just like, oh, I never even thought of, the utility side of a hotel. There's so many different things, and it's really fun to watch them get very creative on how they can use it.
Absolutely. That's one of my favorite interactions with customers, is just watching this light bulb, and then they start just thinking about all the ways that they could use it or implement it. And it is really neat. So, you mentioned the book of hell, as we all call it over here. I'm going to touch on that. And, what have been the biggest obstacles that you have seen hindering a successful implementation?
The biggest one off the top of my head is connectivity. It's connectivity and security, because if you don't have the connectivity you need, and there's ways around it, but this is where you kind of get what we've seen a little bit, where you get IT and OT, and maybe not the convergence of it that you need in the respect of, you've got to have that connectivity. I don't care if it's satellite, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, whatever it is, they've got to have it for sensors, for wearables, for the workers, for whatever it is. You have to ensure that's in there. In most cases, what we've seen, especially on the industrial side, so mining, utilities, electrical, all of that type of stuff, where you're not in a building, it's all about, okay, we need something out here. We have new things coming out all the time. Now we're testing out private 5G. There's all kinds of things that you can bring in, but you have to have the acceptance and the support of that corporate member and its executive team or management teams to have that be pulled in, because immediately, if you don't have connectivity, you don't have that. The other thing is security, and it's making sure you have, most companies have been diligent about cybersecurity. It's making sure that us as CBT have a stout practice in that. Like, we know we're doing a good job. We got past nuclear power plant, and we were able to, be blessed by them. I think that was something that I was very happy about, because we always want to have the best of the best to ensure that across platforms, across the different things that you have to do, that we have the right personnel. But I think getting past a nuclear power plant security practice is really good. So I would say it's mostly the connectivity. There's other things that we've run into in the roadblock. There's MDMs. There's a lot of things that these manufacturers say, oh, we got it, it works. And when we actually get down to really diving in, which is one of our fortes, we drink our own champagne or eat our own dog food, whatever you want to call it. We test this out. We have full-time staff at TechSmart to test this stuff out, because you shouldn't go sell it to a client if you don't know that it works or it doesn't work. So we test through that. And I think getting through that practice and being able to showcase, we did it, we documented it, we know what we're doing. Not that you're not going to run into some anomalies. We've seen it across the board. Every client is different. And we don't say we customize it, we tailor it. It's tailoring, but it's still something you really have to understand the client. You have to understand their distinct environment and what they're trying to solve, what problem they're trying to solve, or what goal they're trying to achieve.
Absolutely. And yes, the nuclear was certainly a feat, but glad that we came out on top of that one, but it was a process. All right. So the future for technology in the industry, what does this all look like in 5 years?
Well, I keep hearing, the industrial metaverse, and I'm just like, guys, we haven't even gotten to adoption yet. Not that we won't look at it. And I think a lot of people will look at it and say, it's kind of VR. You're going to have, a metaverse, a universal metaverse, and you'll have a plant. And it's kind of stuff we're already touching on now. But I think we have to see the adoption. And I see 2022 as being much better. I've also heard that, in EMEA, overseas, especially in European countries, they're quicker to adopt than I've seen in other countries. I'm hoping that in the United States and North and South America, that they take more of an adoption, because I think we are ready for that. We've done successful POCs. I know for years it was POC purgatory. Everybody was like, I don't want to do it because it just goes nowhere. We've kind of come up with a formula, and we don't mind sharing. Crawl, walk, run. Even if you have to push your clients back or who you're working with, push them back to a crawl, because what we've seen is the ones that bite off and want to boil the ocean, basically don't get anywhere. They're so strapped in documentation and plans and everything else that they never get anywhere. We believe the formula is start small, get focused on one solution and one use case, deliver that, provide an ROI. That way you get the check mark for the CFO that says, hey, you did it. There's an ROI, it's quantifiable. And now we can go save more money or produce more products or whatever it is that they're trying to do. I think that's the key right now is let's get this stuff deployed. Let's see how it comes about. We already know that AI, ML, machine learning, video analytics, drones with video, there is so much that is coming or is here, but you hear about it, but you don't hear about it in particular cases that it's been used and deployed. To us, we want to see it used. We want to see it deployed. We want to see workers working it. And then we believe it. And not that we don't want to believe that it's possible, but maybe there's a few more steps to get us there. So I think it's all going toward what I would call a ton of virtual reality, if you want to call it metaverse. I think it's going toward that because then you can actually throw people into something and train them in a virtual environment and get them more prepared. But I think that is definitely a ways off before, especially the way I've seen the adoption over the last 5 years. And although I think it will ramp, it's not going to ramp that quickly.
I agree. All right. Well, Kelly, our time here is coming to an end. Is there anything that you'd like to share in closing?
Oh boy. What I would say is, especially as a female in tech, one of the things we've talked about is tech has always been a love of mine since I got out of high school. And that was a long time ago. And so I've been in times when, females weren't really in tech, but I think what we need to do is just jump in just as humans, get in, let's work through this. I think I will say the one thing about women is I see we bring a different perspective. And when you go into OT, IT, and you go into the convergence and you look at either an industrial Internet of Things or just Internet of Things, I think there's a different side we bring and a different approach we bring. So I think bringing those together from both sides, from all sides, from any sides, is always what makes it better. You look at Texmark and the solutions we've done, it's the inputs from frontline workers all the way up to executive management. It's not one group, it's all groups together, having a voice, saying what needs to be done, and then being listened to and being respected.
That's a great summary. So thank you, Kelly. That's a wrap for us. I don't know if we have any questions.
Hi guys, thanks for that. That was brilliant. Yes, we do have questions. So the first question we have is you work with a wide range of clients at CBT from a broad range of industries. Is there a particular industry you're seeing more requirements from, and does this reflect the trends you're expecting to see in 2022?
I can tell you exactly what we're seeing in utilities has been massive. And I think a lot of that was because of COVID and lone workers. So we did see that alone, we have over 32 opportunities we're working right now. It's just proliferating. And I think, and we started very early with utilities, so it makes sense because I think word of mouth and industries that work together are saying CBT did this for us. And so that is helping grow it. The other thing we're seeing is service industries, whether it be, and that's kind of broad, but think of trucking, repairs, a lot of things in there with service industries, kind of the same thing, maybe a lone worker out in a truck doing something. So we're seeing that as well. The other thing we're seeing is manufacturing and oil and gas. And that has to do with refinery of the future or being able to be a plant of the future and bring the 21st century into those, because mostly those are quite old and legacy industries with old products, old refineries, old plants. And if they're going to renew, they might as well jump right into IoT.
Okay, awesome. Another question we have, and I expect this is quite a hard one to answer, or maybe not. If you had to pinpoint the most instrumental development in tech or IoT in the last 3 years that's completely changed the way you work, what would it be? Or there might not be one. You can, lengthen the time to maybe 5 years if you'd like.
I'm going to say, for me, it's about the connectivity.
Okay.
Because without it, it doesn't matter if you have a sensor if you can't connect it. It doesn't matter if you have a wearable if you can't connect it. This data can't go anywhere unless it's connected. And in IT, it was cables and fiber and everything else. This, it's it's the spectrum of cellular. It's people on their smartphones. That's even considered IoT. So it's a matter of, I think the connectivity it's what you had to have in order for any of this to happen.
Yeah. Okay, and I'm going to bring the questions back to kind of like teams now. What are the key skills you need from your team to kind of that would make for a successful implementation?
Well, what we've seen, and Megan can comment on this as well, is if we're going to do IoT, which is OT and IT converging, you better have both sides. So early on, I hired OT personnel,
Right.
control system engineers, design engineers, things that were on the other side. If you don't understand that side of it, you can't really deliver it. And we needed to be able to control that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would add to that and just say that sometimes those two groups don't necessarily speak the same language. And we find ourselves acting as a translator oftentimes, which I think brings a lot of value to our customers.
Yeah, I understand. When those kind of teams don't work in tandem, how have you overcome that?
We've actually done presentations to clients to explain to them the differences between OT and IT culture, because they just went, ooh, we didn't even think about that. But internally, we've actually done a little bit of training with HR of being respectful of, because if you think about this, and I don't want anybody to be offended, but IT is not perfect. It's not perfection. It's you put this stuff together and you can fine tune it and run. In some cases, OT includes perfection. You have to be perfect or you throw out a batch of whatever you manufactured. So those are the differences. OT sometimes can look and say, oh, well, they aren't perfect. They kind of don't do it perfectly. Well, that's because that's the nature of IT, not the nature of OT. So we've done some cross education of what the differences are, why they have to be that way. They don't think one or the other, don't think they're better. They just, have to be within that culture and have to follow that guideline. And so be respectful of them, be open, learn about it, and be respectful.
Okay, cool. And the last question I have is a question that was asked to one of our guest speakers earlier in the day, but since then we've asked every single one of our speakers. If you could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell them? What advice would you tell them?
I'm going to let Megan answer that one first.
Well, I'm only 20, so I can't even go back and oh geez, my 20-year-old self. Listen to your mom. Stop being a pain in the butt is really what I would go with. Honestly, just follow, your passion is, I think, what the advice that I would give to do something that you enjoy doing every single day.
Yeah.
And I would say be bolder, because I was a wallflower. I never in a million years in my 20 would I give a talk like this. I'd sit in the back against the wall and I'd listen and observe, which is great to listen and observe, but you know more than you think you do. And especially if you stop and you listen, be willing to offer, comments, be willing to go out there and kind of show yourself in a different light, and don't sit back.
I'd say that's a common theme that we've heard from a lot of our speakers today, and one that I can definitely agree with. I'm 30, but I feel like my approach to work in the last 6 years has completely changed. Sometimes when I look back at my 24-year-old self, I'm like, oh my God, like she didn't know what she was on about, but now, you grow so much.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, well, that's it for the session, guys. Unless you have anything else that you'd like to add. That's great.
Not that I can think of. Just welcome all the women to IoT. We love having you. Keep coming, keep recruiting.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being a part of this initiative. You've been fantastic. Meghan, if you'd like to introduce our next guests.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having us. And
Yeah.
the next session is titled Huawei Presents Building an Intelligent Ecosystem Needs a Diverse Skill Set. We will hear from Technical Project Manager Joey Liu and Software Engineer Maria Polichevako.
Awesome. Thank you so much, guys. See you soon.
Thank you.